This is the Conversation of Things podcast from Smarter Home Life. I'm Joe DeGanzik, a Phoenix-based home automation and lighting consultant and all-around tech guy. I'm having conversations about technology, the smart home, and all of those connected devices with interesting people both inside and sometimes outside the tech world. Recorded Friday, August 25th, 2017, my guest on this episode is Kent Dickson, co-founder and CEO of Yonomi. Yonomi is a mobile app and cloud platform that quietly works to enhance and coordinate your various connected devices. And now, without further ado, let the conversation begin. So I am happy to have as the third guest of the Conversation of Things podcast, although he is actually back on Smarter Home Life. I want to welcome Kent Dickson, the co-founder and CEO of Yonomi. Hello, Kent.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
As we say hello to each other at the same time, thanks to delays in the internet, the IoT. I'm great. How are you doing, Kent?
I'm doing great. Really, really pleased to be back on with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think you were on around about a year ago. It was around the time of the 100th episode of Smarter Home Life, which we have vastly surpassed at this point. It's great to have you back on. We were just chatting kind of during the pre-show about how this year is a really interesting year for the IoT, for the smart home. And I have to say, you know, this podcast, which I started up a few months ago, which kind of covers various, you know, pieces of the tech world, in and out of the tech world. But I'm like, I need to have Kent back on because he is in the center of all of this. I mean, I report on this stuff and I make how-to videos and Q&As on YouTube, but you're actually doing this stuff. And so I'm like, I cannot wait to ask him the tough questions about what's going on.
And there are many.
Of course. So before we get too far into it, because we want to make the assumption that everybody knows about Yonomi and everyone in the world has downloaded it, but that may or may not be the case. So just give me the brief elevator pitch so we can bring everyone up to speed. What is Yonomi?
So Yonomi is a smart home company, and our aim is to change the way that devices interact with humans. And so we're building technologies that create wonderful experiences in our daily lives, in our homes. And so while that's all the fluffy piece of it, what that really means is that we built a platform, a software platform, upon which we've delivered the Yonomi app, which I imagine many of your users have tried out, that helps all of your smart devices from various vendors all work together in a coordinated way to hopefully add some delight and wonder on a daily basis in the home. In addition to that platform that we use ourselves for our own consumer experience, we also make available to other people who are building smart home products, whether they're device manufacturers or service providers who want to do, you know, highly efficient, scalable, secure, and ultimately, you know, delightful products for their users.
That's great. You're almost like a little bit like Amazon minus the e-commerce side, where you built the infrastructure for yourselves to make Yonomi work, and then you're like, hey, this is pretty cool. We should market this as an actual service. And
that's the playbook for sure.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on that coming up, but that's the Thin Cloud service that debuted, I want to say in April or May. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was late April.
Okay, cool. And Yonomi is, I know we talked in depth about this last time, and for those of you who are watching and listening to the podcast, you can jump back and I'll provide a link back to our original discussion about a year ago. We talked a lot about security and stuff. I know people are always thinking about, you know, if I'm going to use a third-party app that's going to connect all these things, which is great because then you don't have to use all the separate apps. But Yonomi is, I mean, it's a secure platform. People don't have to be worried about entering all their credentials and having their stuff hacked, right?
That's right. I mean, with all the typical disclaimers that users really do need to, you know, take responsibility for managing their own passwords and things like that, and making sure that their home is safe and secure, and your Wi-Fi is not wide open, and all these things. But as an integrator, it's important. Yeah, as an integrator of other companies' devices for consumers, it's a really important question, and it comes up frequently. We don't, and hold on to your passwords. So you may coordinate your Nest and your Philips Hue and your August Smart Lock and whatever else with Yonomi through our app. And while connecting those things, there is a screen where you put in your username and password. That uses a methodology code called OAuth, which the software developers in the audience will know very well, but the rest of the folks don't. In the end, what it means is that you don't provide that username and password to Yonomi for us to store. You're actually, when you're inputting that, you're actually giving it back to Nest and telling Nest, I'm authenticating with you again so that you know it's me, Joe, and I would like to grant Yonomi access to my Nest account so they could change the temperature and the cooling mode. And with that, Nest provides us a token. So we never have your username and password. You can still change that whenever you want. Doesn't affect anything. And you can actually go revoke Yonomi's token at any point. So we can, at that point after you revoke it, we could no longer control or monitor your Nest. So it places the consumer in control, and you don't have to do this old-fashioned thing that folks used to do, which is cache those username and passwords in order to make everything work together. And that's a very bad practice indeed.
Right. Yeah. So again, kind of as we were talking in the pre-show, the smart home has and technology in general has just come a long way in the past couple of years, and it continues to be ready for. I think this holiday shopping season is going to be really interesting with a lot of different things coming out, but we'll talk about that a little later too. What's new? It's been a year, obviously. I know you've had a few more devices and so forth. At least let's stick on the consumer side, the Yonomi app, and I'll probably edit in some screenshots and so forth. I was just playing with it recently again to see kind of what's new. And one thing I like about the app is you haven't completely overhauled the experience. It's still a consistent, easy to use app. But what is new in terms of any new devices and any secret announcements that you would like to tease here on the show about upcoming integrations and new things we can look for in the app in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, well, in terms of new integrations, the truth is, in the year probably since we last talked, for probably the last 10 months at least, we haven't really added much in terms of new integrations. We had about 65 this time last year, and those were good. We felt that we were covering most of what our users were asking for, and instead of investing in more connectors for more devices, we were investing in some other infrastructure-y things like ThinCloud that you mentioned in order to start opening up our own platform for third parties to start using and to refine the user experience in the app. You're right. We have it's a lot of work to make complex things simple, and so we try not to muck too much with our user experience and keep it as simple and clean as possible. We have had a number of enhancements. We release a new version about once a month of the app, and usually there are subtle changes in there that have to do with user experience, reliability, and efficiency. One of the neat things that we added recently that we heard a lot of feedback from our users is we want to be able to have multiple locations. First we were just, hey, establish your home location, and that will trigger your arrive home, your leave home, and various other things. And we had a lot of people say, I don't spend all my time at this one place. Some of us have vacation homes, and some of us have, small offices and everything. We want those places to be automated with Yonomi too. So we added that recently, and people seem to like that quite a bit. But back to the integrations and the connectors. So the tease here is that you're about to see a flurry of new announcements about new things coming. We have, even though we haven't announced any of late, we've had quite a lot of work going on with ourselves and partners on a number of integrations that will be coming out literally within the next, probably rolling thunder a little bit here for the next 4 to 6 weeks as new announcements come out about new devices. And they're largely ones that we've just had, incredible groundswell of consumer requests for. We listen very closely when our consumers send us notes about which devices they'd like to see. I mean, there's endless numbers of things that we can add. I think our backlog is like 250 different distinct devices that have been requested by users that we don't currently support. It'll be a while till we get to all 250 of those, but we do prioritize them based on the frequency of consumer requests and of, basically our subjective view of the utility of including those in Yonomi so they can be used together with something else. It's not as interesting, for instance, to include your smart refrigerator together with your lights and your TV and everything else, because you're not really going to be turning that thing off. It's for other reasons, not so that or routine like scenarios.
Do you plan to support one of the great things I know that Yonomi does support is Lady A. I won't say the name and set off everybody's Echo devices. And that's popular because you can tie things together that normally you couldn't, such as things like the August Smart Lock and other devices that may have security implications. What about other, I guess, you probably can't say it. Maybe you can just like wink if you're going to do this, Google Assistant, some of the other voice services that are still relatively new. They're all new, realistically. Will some of those maybe be coming to Yonomi coming soon?
I want to get this right.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, it's important for us to say that, yeah, indeed, we've been working with the Lady A product team very closely for a couple of years, and they've been wonderful to work with, and obviously they're experiencing massive success, and we're very happy to partner with them. But our philosophy from very day one of founding the company is that we're agnostic. The point of Yonomi is that we intend to work with all manner of connected devices and services that are likely to come into mass market homes. And so there are other great voice assistants that are on the market today, and without a doubt we'll be working with those as well and try to create just as easy of a user experience so that you as a consumer can expect that with your devices, whatever you have, it's going to work with Yonomi, whether it's a voice assistant or a smart light bulb or a thermostat or a wearable. That all that stuff is going to work, in a very well integrated, clean fashion with Yonomi, and your routines follow you around.
Yeah, and it's for those of you who haven't tried it, you can download it it's on iOS, it's on Android. You can do all the normal things you can think of with that you could do with a home automation like physical hub, except it's on your phone, and it's so it's a lot easier to deal with, and you could do scheduling and, like Kent mentioned, locations, and just it's a great app, and it's free, so nothing to lose. So definitely check it out. So I don't know if I've asked you this, Kent. So I think we may have talked about it, and you've mentioned this during the talking about how kind of Yonomi kind of came to be. But so what was your background? Like what were you doing before Yonomi, and did that kind of, I would assume that you're probably in the tech world on some level, and that kind of shape your the experience and your drive to ultimately create and co-found Yonomi?
Yeah. Well, I've always been a software guy. I mean, actually, I'm an aerospace engineer by training, and I worked in aerospace for a short period of time, but I really was drawn to software and software platforms that solve a lot of hard, lower level problems in order to simplify the experience for somebody higher up in the stack. And so for a long time, not to get too deep into it, for a long time, I worked for a company. Actually, I had a startup. I was involved in a startup that got acquired by a company called BEA. And at BEA Systems, we created a software platform called WebLogic. This is the early 2000s, right? Late 90s, early 2000s.
Remember that name somewhere.
But it turns out the platform WebLogic was a great piece of middleware that allowed lots of people, both on the consumer and enterprise side, to build other applications that were massively scalable, highly secure, and very, very reliable. And that's what we kind of made our name on. And probably still a lot of the enterprise banking, things that use today are still running on that platform. That's where I really got my passion for doing the hard problems to make the higher level things easier. And the massive sort of global effects that they can have were really exciting. That gave way, ultimately we were acquired by Oracle, which enabled me to go do some more startups. And I went and became CTO at a company called Tendril, which was making a platform for the smart home, focusing on how homes can consume energy more efficiently. And so it was integrated with smart meters. We started building our own thermostats and plugs. This was pre-Nest, of course, pre-Wemo, and real-time displays to be able to teach users how they're using energy, and be able to preemptively control it in a more intelligent way. And so that was where my IoT journey began. I kind of brought kind of the enterprise qualities of WebLogic to this new IoT arena. And then also through that, I started doing some work with algorithmic optimization and machine learning, and got very intrigued with that, and went and helped another AI company for a little bit. But I came back to, after leaving Tendril, I came back to the smart home and IoT in general is the next, yes, it's the big opportunity. It's clearly, in terms of macro trends, it's the big technology wave that's coming. And so, but I didn't just jump on it because I believe in the big technology wave and I was out to make $1 billion. I jumped on it because I was pretty intimately familiar with this space and intimately familiar with what these vendors, the Sonos and the Nests and the Belkins of the world were doing in this. And I had this moment of clarity where I said, dear God, the user experience might end up really sucking. It might end up being really bad because these devices are natively not integrated in any way. They all are sort of disaggregated in ways that are going to actually create more complexity than anything else.
I make the comparison, like if we had 10 Bluetooth or shortwave data radio standards, back in the early 2000s, instead of a single Bluetooth, what would that have done for that sector of the market?
Yeah, precisely. So this is the problem that I really foresaw, and so I'm sure somebody's going to address that, right? And and kind of looked around for a while, and nobody was really addressing it in a way that I thought was ultimately going to be very satisfying for mainstream users. And this is where it has to go, right? I mean, IoT is going to be a failure if only guys like you and me use it. So I reached out to a couple of my colleagues who I knew passionately cared about the same problem. And I said, apparently nobody's going to solve this. So I guess we're going to have to take matters into our own hands. And the three of us, Joss and Garrett and I, started the company 4 years ago now, which seems like a lifetime ago.
That's a long time. In the IoT space, that's a long time.
Yeah, that's right. With the idea being that we can help all these device makers build better products and help consumers be able to consume those in ways that are going to be much more wonderful and simple and satisfying and successful ultimately. And we can do it in a way that's that serves everybody equally well. And we could be agnostic. We don't have to. There doesn't have to be any of these false, ecosystems or walled gardens or anything else. There's a way that software done right can actually solve all these problems. It can turn this complexity into simplicity. And so that's what we set out to do. And here we are 4 years later, and
you're doing it.
And chipping away at this. This is life's work, no doubt. We'll never be done, but I think we've made some good progress.
No, I think so, and that it's a sort of a perfect segue talking about and building that foundation, which of course I'm guessing, like you were saying, trying to solve some of these things. So I'm guessing that really the app obviously was the first idea, and now with the launch of Thin Cloud, being able to market what you've built, which I want to jump into next. But I mean, the app came first, right?
Well, the app was the first thing that people outside the companies sort of came to know us for.
Okay, that makes sense.
The app itself is, an interface for this larger platform that we built. We always had the vision that we were going to build something that was going to be usable by multiple parties, and we were just. And the app, in some ways, was the first sort of sample application for what this platform could do. I mean, to be clear, we're all in on this app, or really the consumer platform. We don't even these days like to talk about it as an app, because the app is really just part of the user interface for it. It's not the actual platform. It goes wherever you interact with it through Alexa or your voice service or your wearable or whatever. It's not a traditional app in that stance, but that consumer experience and being able to normalize and automate things across multiple vendors is a key demonstration of the power of the platform.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Thin Cloud. Obviously, there's the name of it. I'm sure that wasn't necessary. You didn't name it before you actually built it, but this is the infrastructure behind the app. It's the technology that glues all this stuff together. And now you're making it. Now it's something that's available on the other side of things to the companies who are making these things, the Internet of Things, all these connected things. So tell me a little bit about that, and feel free to, because this podcast is listened to by techies and regular people and so forth. So for the techie audience, feel free to kind of deep dive into it a little bit if you'd like. Tell us a little bit about how this thing ticks and how some companies are using it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll clarify a little bit. One of the things you said, what Thin Cloud is it's kind of the first of the B2B products, if you will, from Yonomi. And what it is we spun out a subset of what the Yonomi platform does. Okay. Around device management and user management, individual device management, user management. So it's not all the integration bits and everything else that you probably associate with the Yonomi app, but it's a lot of the low-level, maybe not sexy types of things, but are all the mission-critical things that if I'm a device maker and I've got this idea for this new widget, I'm going to pick up a mouse here. This is an example. I've got this idea of a new widget that's going to have some wireless technology in it, and I can design the PCBs and I can do the board layout and the plastics and the industrial design and everything else. And but there's one piece of it that we saw a lot of our partners, because we hang out with a lot of people who are device makers, we're getting wrapped around the axle on, is like, okay, the implication of building this connected product is that it's got to connect it to the cloud. And it's got to connect to the cloud so it can be remotely monitorable, remotely controllable, and that it can be updated. Because version 1 of this thing with the firmware embedded into it is going to need to be updated. It's not going to be perfect. And so we saw a lot of people spending, in some cases, years and tens of millions of dollars trying to build out the cloud infrastructure and software in order to get this thing to market. And so we said, we've got most of that. We've already built that. That was part of our Yonomi platform. Let's spin that out into something extremely lightweight, because the complexity of what you need to do with this individual device is actually much less than what we do with the larger Yonomi integration platform. When you have 60 or more devices all working together, that's complexity on the back end. This, at the end of the day, just needs to phone home and say, here I am, and here's how you control me, and here's my current state. And so we rolled that out into a thing called ThinCloud, and it's called ThinCloud for a couple of reasons. One, because it in fact is really lightweight. It's a major sort of subset of the functionality of what we did for the Yonomi platform, with some other augmented things to really satisfy the device manufacturer use case. And it's also thin because it's extremely efficient in the way that it operates. And so the geeks in your audience will probably be at least tangentially aware of the term serverless architecture. It's kind of a buzzword in cloud computing these days.
Right.
And so we believe that we've built the first sort of turnkey IoT head-end cloud platform that is fully serverless, which means that it's going to be far less expensive to operate over the long term. And this is a crucially important piece of the puzzle for a device manufacturer, because if you're building a device that you sell to consumers, you're going to almost certainly get paid once. There's almost no such thing as a subscription fee for consumer devices.
There's not.
Very few
smart locks so expensive, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Very few exceptions. Yeah, that smart lock, somebody's going to pay you $200 for a smart lock, take it home and install it. It's going to connect to the cloud, at least occasionally, and consume resources for the next 10 to 20 years. The implication of you as the device manufacturer is that, oh dear God, I am going to be paying AWS or Google or somebody else for the next 10 to 20 years to keep that device live, to keep the, to fulfill my promise for that product. And so being able to deploy in an extremely lightweight architecture in a way that is still going to make that $200 lock profitable for you, even with the factoring in the long-term expenses of that, is critical. And we didn't see that any of the off-the-shelf turnkey IoT solutions really were optimized for that use case. They're really more industrial and commercial platforms, which actually do have recurring revenue coming in for them, unlike the consumer space. And so we rethought the problem, we rethought the architecture, and we brought this to market. And we believe that it's going to be a massive boon for device manufacturers who not only can they get to market much faster after they design their widget and get it through manufacturing, they can turn it on and be instantly ready to scale globally, but they'll also be able to do it in a way that is not going to make their business case turn upside down. Yeah,
I think it's incredibly important. I was rereading just to make sure I have information right on your some of the information on ThinCloud, and just correct me if I'm wrong. There's for the B2B side, obviously, which is what that is. On the licensing part, it looks like companies can also just buy it outright, right? In terms of the source code, and they can. They would still. I'm guessing they would still really be using. They would be going through Yonomi's systems and I don't want to say servers because it's serverless, but they can kind of buy it outright. But I'm assuming there's still some sort of ongoing fee to use it as they move forward in time, right?
Yeah, well, it's actually meant to be something that if you, the device manufacturer, are sitting around thinking, sure, it sounds great to use somebody else's software for this, but this is so mission critical for me, I feel like I have to own it. Like if Yonomi were to go out of business or to be acquired by my competitor or something like that, I can't have that dependency. And so we've kind of created this package that says, hey, guess what? ThinCloud ultimately is software and a framework that if you want it, we will sell you the source code. You can walk away. You can take it and walk away and never call us again, never write us another check or anything else. And that's all well and good. You basically say, I could have built this myself maybe if I'd hired a bunch of really smart people and had a year or two to build this, but instead I'm going to buy it today and walk away with it and have the end result. So that's the point of having at least the option for you to buy the source code outright. Of course, we have another option of you don't have to buy the source code because you can consume it as a service, just like any other good software these days. You want it, you basically can start using it. It's immediately available for you in the cloud, and you can be running against it completely white labeled and all of this stuff. And then there's sort of this in-between thing where you can't actually buy it, but then you can have us do the managed services for it, which is we'll deploy it to AWS on your behalf. We'll manage and monitor it 24/7, 365, because we already do that for a bunch of other services already. It's really the business that we're in. We're quite good at it, and that's an optional thing for us to do it for you instead of again hiring an army of people to
manage it. Yeah, which is tough for any time that a startup can outsource something that is an absolute requirement for their business to someone who's going to do it really well, is especially at a lower cost than, again, like you said, trying to do it yourself or outsource it to someone else. It's going to be much more expensive. It's a win-win. And speaking of, because I mentioned smart locks as a example, I haven't had enough coffee yet today, obviously. But anyways, so one of your case studies is from Schlage, who's been around for a long time in the lock business and has, of course, entered the smart lock business over the past couple of years. Tell me a little bit, some highlights of how that's done really well for them.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to work with a company like Schlage because as you mentioned, they're extremely well-known brand. They've been around for over 100 years. They're a major market player. And they're, at the end of the day, even though they're a hardware maker, they are in the security business, right? This is exactly what these products do, is they secure your home. And so we were thrilled to be able to work with them as one of the first adopters of Thin Cloud, because we wanted to be challenged by the people with the most serious of use cases. From a security standpoint, from a scalability standpoint, from a performance standpoint.
User base, a big user base hit it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so they've been fantastic from that standpoint. And I think they really are very sort of forward-looking too, and share a lot of our philosophies about agnosticism and not wanting to get trapped in any one individual ecosystem or walled garden, but to be able ultimately to have a product that can be used by anybody. And in any type of home, whether it might be a HomeKit home or an Alexa home or something else, that it's going to be naturally compatible with everything.
And actually, that was leading to, you said the magic word that I was about to ask you a question on. How does something like Thin Cloud, I'm assuming that on the consumer side, the Yonomi app, because of Apple's kind of walled garden with HomeKit, you probably can't provide much because they've got so much locked down, even though many devices that support HomeKit now support some of the other platforms. So how does Thin Cloud, does that work within the HomeKit world at all? Or HomeKit really managed by Apple in terms of that side of the communication. Am I right?
Yeah, it's sort of a nuanced thing ultimately, but you're right. HomeKit's when devices are using a HomeKit mode,
right?
They operate in a certain way that is not completely open to the rest of the
world,
non-HomeKit world, and therefore, in cases of some of our customers, including Schlage, their products are HomeKit compatible.
Right.
So the user is using it in HomeKit, ThinCloud is still doing parts of the user authentication and a few of the back-end services. But if it's being used by a non-HomeKit home or an Android user or whomever, then it consumes even more of the ThinCloud resources for doing more sort of direct device management and things like that otherwise are abstracted, I guess one would say in the
yeah. All right. Well, I want to take just a brief moment. We're going to do sort of a house ad real quick, and then we'll kind of jump back to it. So this is for all of our viewers and anyone who's watching live. So Smarter Home Life, which produces this podcast, if you don't know who I am, I'm a YouTuber and a local smart home and lighting consultant here in the Phoenix area. But anyways, the ads that appear on these videos and on the website just don't quite pay all of the bills. And so part of these videos and so forth is literally made possible by our audience, and that's done through Patreon. It's a wonderful platform that you can feel good about supporting independent media, and it's the crowdfunding model, so it's like $1 or $2 from a lot of people makes a great difference. We're sort of in I guess this would be the first annual pledge drive, so it almost sounds like your local NPR station. And we're trying to get to a certain fundraising goal, and we've got some really cool bonuses that'll come out in September. And it's open. Some of the additional perks of Patreon for our Patreon users are kind of open to everyone at this point who even jumps in at the $1 level. And you can find information about all of this at patreon.com/smarterhomelife. And one of the perks is, of course, these podcasts, which started up a few months ago and now are done when possible, usually live in terms of with the guest, and I chat with them. And you have the ability as a Patreon contributor to jump into a chat room and to watch live and interact, because the public just gets to see the recorded version. And so if you are watching right now, if you're part of the Patreon family, thank you, of course, for your support. And please do feel to jump in the chat room. There was a link posted earlier, and ask Kent your questions. So hopefully we'll get that in the next 20, 25 minutes or so as we eventually wrap up the show. But again, patreon.com/smarterhomelife. A little bit goes a long way, and we'll get back to the interview and the podcast. So, all right. So now some kind of, we've covered a lot of the tech stuff, which is really great. And I think ThinCloud is fantastic. And you're leveraging all of this latest technology, which kind of, the other thing some people would say is, all right, all of this technology is great, it's convenient, but then of course we're making more stuff and we're probably damaging the environment. But hey, you could say, of course, ThinCloud, it's thin, and like you were saying with the serverless technology, it's only consuming and utilizing resources on demand. So you're not deploying massive amounts of physical servers. So it, in a sense, it's allowing all these new little devices to just use resources kind of in that on-demand model, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the way to think about it. It really does massively reduce wasted energy and resources that would traditionally be being used by live cloud service, and this basically gets rid of all of the waste.
Yeah, because we're making more of this stuff, and then you've got to support it with all of these additional servers. But of course, Amazon and Facebook, we hear about this in the news every few months. You hear about new data centers being built in places like Iceland because they're being cooled by the environment instead of dedicated cooling systems. This is the stuff that makes me excited, because it's like, all right, we've been building all these systems and technologies for decades. Now we're figuring out new ways to have them coexist with the planet a little bit better, which I think that's cool. So now, all right, talking about all of these devices. So here's one for you, Kent, as CEO of Yonomi, who is a company that brings all these devices together. So tell me a little bit, as I get the question right, what is in your smart home?
Well, I have a little bit of everything. And what's funny about my home, of course, is that we're not using the generally available Yonomi stack in my home. We're always using the stuff that's in beta. And I have 3 kids and a spouse, and they frequently lament the fact that they live in a test lab. because sometimes, when you're in beta, things aren't quite working. But we also have a lot of laughs about it. But no, we have a pretty interesting smart home. So we, the TV is automated through Harmony Hub. We have every manner of smart lights in our home. It might be even to a guy like you who's a lighting expert. I think it would be quite interesting to see the mishmash of LifeX and Hue and some others that I won't mention.
Yeah, when are you going to do like the ultimate tour of the Yonomi smart home?
Yeah, well, we should do that. That would
you should. And I apologize if you can hear, and the audience can probably hear, the landscapers have shown up at the inopportune time during the podcast recording, so there's a little bit of background. But I'm guessing. So I mean, again, like you said, it's a test lab beta.
Yeah. So TVs, lights, locks, music are all part of our smart home.
Okay, and I'm guessing, because of course I would assume that really all of the automation is being handled by Yonomi, and there's nothing else behind the scenes, right? In terms of coordinating it.
No, we are eating our own dog food, as they say.
So all right. So this is where I'm gonna ask you to look into your magic crystal ball, and these are the tough questions, and I think it's sometimes tougher than ever because of the industry continues to grow and change so rapidly. So if you were to look out a couple of years into the smart home, and maybe even in the IoT world, if we're kind of concerning residential, because that could open us up to a whole other discussion. But really in this connected device world revolving around the smarter home, as I'd like to call it, what do you see in the next couple of years happening? Are there big changes happening? Are we going to kind of continue the course a little bit? What do you see?
I think that the trajectory that we're on right now will continue for a while, and that trajectory includes the fact that last generation devices are all now showing up with wireless radios in them. So we're already at the point where you can't buy a television that doesn't have Wi-Fi in them. Light bulbs will become basically, they'll all be smart light bulbs of one form or another. It costs barely more today to get a Zigbee controllable light bulb as it does to have a dumb bulb. So one by one, all of those traditional things will flip over into smart things, and furthermore, we'll have new smart things that we didn't have even before, new categories of sensors and control devices that didn't exist before. I mean, think of Roomba or whatever. That 20 years ago, if you would have told people that there'd be a robot just running around autonomously vacuuming the house, you would have put in a mental institution. So
although that
I think
was the one thing that wasn't in. They had the robotic dog walker in Back to the Future too. They didn't feature a robotic vacuum cleaner. What's up with that? So maybe we couldn't have predicted that.
Yeah. So I think that trajectory will continue, where just more and more as you acquire new things for your home, they're going to be remotely controllable via wireless radios. So that's sort of this.
You won't be able to avoid it, right?
Yeah, there'll be almost no way to avoid it. Like you say, you won't be able to buy a TV or a light bulb that isn't properly controlled. So there's that, and then I think the trend towards voice and other sort of non-screen based controls will continue to flourish. We've made amazing progress with voice as an interface to your things. That trajectory will improve, and I think you'll see a lot of other similar types of leaps forward, like gesture-based control of things. There'd be sensors that are all around you all the time, so you might be able to raise your hand to turn on the lights, or lower your hand partway to dim them, or point at television to turn it on, for instance. So I think that'll be where we get to. But ultimately, the underlying thread in all of this is that machine learning and AI will be a big part of this. And in the end, I know there's all these dystopian versions of what that looks like, but in the end, it really is going to be necessary in order to make devices really acting intelligently in unison together to the benefit and the delight of users. And to have other great side effects like energy efficiency. We kind of mentioned that earlier. Oh my God, all these devices, being manufactured, consuming resources and everything else, but we can make them more efficient in ways we talked about within cloud. But we can make them actually so much better. The end result of lighting that knows whether or not anybody's home or awake or asleep or whatever is that it can just do what it needs to do in a largely autonomous way, so that the people who need light will always have it, and the people who don't need it, won't have to be wasting it. That'll be one way. And same with HVAC, and same with security will get better and smarter as a result of these types of optimizations enabled by machine learning. And so I think that's the inevitability here. But it is important to do this in a way that ultimately keeps the user at the center of the design for all of these things, because it's to the benefit of the user, whether it's comfort, convenience, security, control, or expense. That our things are actually there to serve us and delight us.
Let me jump back just a second in terms of talking about voice and gestures. Obviously, Yonomi integrates with Lady A and so forth. Is that something that you obviously get a lot of requests for? Obviously, the voice world and maybe more ways of doing things with Amazon Echo and just these voice devices. They call them voice-first devices. But sometimes I know that people get really excited about voice control, then it doesn't work correctly for them, and then they tend to abandon it. I use it sparingly because to me it's only good for some things. Is it an industry trend that we really think that that's going to be the big thing, or will it just be another way, one of many ways to control things, as we kind of move forward in time?
It'll be one of many ways, no doubt. I mean, it's the one that's kind of upon us right now, and that is creating a lot of excitement and wonder and great advances, I think. However, it's hardly ever going to be the only way that you interact with your home. I mean, it's just voice is, as you point out, it's really good for certain use cases, and in others, it's really bad, or at least socially awkward or inconvenient. And so what we see, we track very closely today, there's basically 3 ways that you can control devices, via voice, via some automated thing that says at sunset, here's a rule that happens, and you ever ask for it, it just happens. And sort of manual, meaning that you push a button, whether it's a switch or a button on your smartwatch or a widget on your home screen or something else, that you push a button to declare your intent that control or a routine or a scene gets done on your behalf. So we can see those 3 categories, and we've noticed very closely over time. Obviously 2 years ago, it was only those second 2. It was either it was automated or you manually did something to make it happen, and then voice came on the scene and came, like up to 50% of the commands of devices now come through voice in our estimation. But I think as other things come onto the market, whether it's gesture-based or something else that we haven't even forecast, comes on the scene, we anticipate the Yonomi platform will be able to incorporate it and make your routines available to it, and they'll all have their place. And I think that's what will be cool about it, is that one by one we can fold these things in just to keep completing the user experience experience and make it better and simpler.
No, I agree with you.
I agree with you. I
The idea of controlling things multiple ways. And you're right also that there may be new ways. I mean, I think 10, 20 years ago, you mentioned a couple minutes ago, gesture-based control, which is in its infancy, I think still. But you would have mentioned that 10 or 20 years ago, and people would have thought, well, how do you even do that? Right? We have technology these days that popped up 5 years ago, say like, consumer drones that were only made possible because of the smartphone. And probably 20 years ago, people would have thought there's no way you're going to have $50 or $100 flying, sort of semi-autonomous toys showing up at Best Buy and other places, because they would have just thought it's impossible. But the impossible today is possible, 5 or 10 years down the road. One question and one item that you mentioned, which was already on my list, that I just want to go into briefly, you touched on this a little bit. Vivint had a big announcement at CES, which there hasn't been that much news, and I need to contact them to see how things are going. They announced their AI platform for the smart home called Sky, which I think may be a bad name because Skynet and the Terminator movies. But aside from that, they described it as a way of that their system could basically, with a user's consent and permission over time, it would adapt to what people are doing and let you live your life without the automation causing you more of a pain in the neck situation, just because you're trying to automate your home, you're not sure how to, and you're trying all these things, and some of them fail and it doesn't work well. One cool thing that's in the Yonomi app right now is you offer suggestions, and that's, I think, part of what AI is going to need to do to help people not just get started with home automation, but adapt to their life. How do you see that playing out in the future without the creepiness that people associate with, as you called it, machine learning and AI, so that they don't feel they're giving up their privacy, or it's being intrusive, or like I said, it's being creepy? How do we get past that?
Well, I think it's a great question, and it doesn't have a simple answer. But again, at the end of the day, I think that if the design center for all of this is the human and how to make this easier and better for them, then we'll come out with the right end solution. At the end of the day, for the normals to be able to really get great value out of smart homes and Internet of Things, they don't want to, I'm quite sure, ever feel like they have to be programmed. So the notion of a rule where you're going to say, there's going to be a trigger and a bunch of different actions, and I'm going to define all the different lights and speakers and things I have in this room to be part of this rule, and then I have to put a bunch of conditions in there that says, but only do this on weekdays after 7 o'clock or whatever. That feels like programming when you put it that way. And that's something that, frankly, my mom is never going to do, does not want to do, does not want to learn that trick. And so I think that's one of the many things that that AI and machine learning can do on our behalf is intuit the types of things that you really want to have happen, whether you explicitly ask for them or that we've just learned across millions of other users who are similar to you that people tend to like the lights dim, when they're watching television, on a weeknight or whatever, and just sort of start doing those things on your behalf, or at least giving you convenient suggestions from time to time. Like, did you know, just tap here and, we can add this additional feature to your watch TV routine. So things like that is how, sort of learning can augment the experience and improve the experience for users and make that very satisfying for them. If folks are spending too much time thinking about how the smart home is working, then we failed. The smart home isn't smart if the user has to give it the smarts.
Is that an area where thinking is it an area that is you're looking at integrating into the Yonomi platform as time goes on, and that would probably also include, like you mentioned, in terms of adding more devices and sensors to be aware of, beyond geofencing and beyond scheduling and whatnot, but understanding temperature in a home and various other aspects to create actions kind of automatically. Is that an area that Yonomi can move into in the next couple of years? Does the platform, I don't know, I guess many people don't read privacy policies and things like that, but is it somewhere kind of built into, because I would assume that would be something to where you'd have to let the users know, well, if you'd like to opt into this, we'll start monitoring kind of what you do, and then we can start making suggestions based on this, which, again, has to be done with a kind of walk that fine line. Is this an area that Yonomi really would like to push into over the next couple of years?
Yeah, without a doubt, because the opportunity to serve the user better is there, and we feel like it's our duty, to do these things that are going to make your experience better, more secure, and simpler over time, and clearly, observing behaviors of humans, behaviors of the devices that reside in homes is part of being able to detect those patterns, detect certain context that's happening in a home, and then be able to optimize the devices around it. So I think anybody that's building a control and automation platform that's worth anything has to be able to consume and sort a lot of data from a lot of different devices in order to infer what the user wants at that particular time, and then serve them, or to be able to surface things that actually might be amiss, that maybe isn't a security event. Like, hey, we detected that the temperature just dropped dramatically in your home, and it's December, and by the way, you're away. Something bad happened. Either the power went out, or a burglar broke a window, or the HVAC, the heater broke down, and be able to alert you. So yeah, it is part of it. The Internet of Things. The implication of it is that the things actually do create data, and that data can be used for good. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We've always been very transparent about what we do and what we do not do. We're not out gathering that data to market to other people. We never expose our consumers' data to a third party in any way. We're just consuming ourselves to fulfill basically our promise to the user.
Is it something? Before we jump into the little fire question, is it something? Obviously, with AI and being able to make those suggestions in the future, is it something to where I guess people would have to opt in to a future service? I would assume at this point, even though you're collecting some of this data, which I would assume you would, because you're coordinating it through the app and through the back-end systems. Would it be something that users would have to opt into in terms of additional recommendations and AI and adding all this kind of machine learning to their account to enable these things in the future? Or is it something that you could look at and say, well, we can make these suggestions relatively soon because we have a little bit of a small trove of data on people already?
Yeah, I think we'll have to see how those sort of features and capabilities sort of fall out, and whether or not we have to consider, sort of changing some of our policies in order to, achieve new and better things for users. Our philosophy certainly is, it's not in our interest to, collect or use anything that we don't need in order to deliver great service to you. So again, with the idea that computing actually is expense as a business ourselves, we don't want to be doing computing or processing or storage or messaging of any sort that isn't going to be providing value at the end of the day. Nobody can really afford to do that. Actually, a few people can afford to do that, I suppose. Yeah. We're not among them. So we're self-interested in being efficient at the same time. So we'll try to make good decisions and transparent ones as we go forward and to do right by users.
So at this point, you're not necessarily really it's not like you have a history of, well, here's every action that the app and Yonomi has done for user X, right? It's really, you're not necessarily collecting a gigantic history log of all these device interactions at this point, right?
We do some, and we do disclose this in all of our policies, and it's for the purpose of doing recommendations today. So the learning that we're doing today, and you pointed this out, that in the app, one of the things we do is give you a list of recommendations. Those are personalized for you. They're not generic recommendations. They're based on the devices that you have and how you are using them today. And then sort of taking a little bit of the wisdom of the crowd to a certain extent, and some human intelligence that goes into that as well, to sort of say, here's the top additional 2 or 3 or 10 routines that you could be running, and we've actually already pre-baked them, so you don't have to go program them yourselves. You can just basically look at that recommendation and enable it right now. So that's one example of how we're kind of doing, collecting data and observing in order to give you a better user experience, more customized, personalized.
So a little bit of AI and machine learning already baked in. So that's fantastic.
A little bit, yeah. It's the journey, yeah.
All right, so let's get to the quick fire questions. I ask basically these same questions of every single guest on the show, and it's always fun to get different answers. And all right, so let's move forward. There are no right or wrong answers. You do not need a buzzer or a bell. So here we go. So what's like one gadget that you currently, and I'm talking to a IoT guy here, what's one gadget, connected or not, that you do not have, but you are really, you must have this thing in the next, couple months, or you've just been hoping to get this?
Roomba.
Roomba. Okay, so you don't have a Roomba.
I do not have a Roomba.
All right. Number 2. So as the IoT guy, so how often do you do the opposite of being connected? How often do you take a day or a weekend and just unplug and you go without your devices or internet connectivity for an entire day?
Probably twice a year.
Okay.
Where I really disconnect, go completely off the grid.
Do you wish you could do it more often?
Yes.
Okay.
I do, but the nature of a startup is really hard to take days off.
All right. All right, so back to the smart home here. What's one thing that you would love to automate, and you can't say the Roomba, what's one thing that you would love to automate in your home, but it seems like it's impossible right now?
That's a really good one. So for me, it's basically the exterior of the home. It's the lawn. We've seen some things that start talking about, robots for the garden or for the lawn or whatever that would mow or pull weeds or do the various gardening tasks. But in my case, as a very busy person, that's the thing that suffers the most. The house gets clean and everything else, but sometimes the garden's been neglected for a long time. I would really love to automate that, but I don't see that being close enough to really hang my hat on.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. What's one thing in your life or in your home that you would not want to automate?
my bicycle.
Okay.
Yeah, so cycling is a passion of mine for one, but it's also transportation for me. Whenever I can, I get around by bike. And there's this big groundswell of e-bikes these days, electronic bikes, which I think are a wonderful thing for the same reason that any electronic motorization is really good, and there's great efficiencies about it and everything else. But my goodness, people, you've got legs. Let's use them.
That's right. That's right. I see these people, especially these guys who have added like lawnmower engines to their bikes, and it's just the pollution is awful. I hate being. Luckily, I just let them pass. I'm a cyclist here as well. I gave up my car last year when at the end of its lease. But and cycling in Phoenix is all kinds of fun, especially during the summer when it's 110 outside. Okay, one app, and you can't say Yonomi. One app that you can't live without.
Slack. Slack is a tremendous app service that I depend on heavily. Our team, it seems like are working all the time, and we're spread across a couple of different cities, Boulder and Austin. And so availability to be able to answer questions or ask questions in real time is critical for us, and Slack is always on the job. It's fantastic.
All right, well, fantastic. All right, you passed the Quickfire test. Always great to get some different answers from everybody on these questions. Is there, as we're kind of wrapping up, because I want to let you go, we're just slightly over an hour at this point. Anything else you want to share about Yonomi, or any of the stuff that you're working on that's coming out? Anything that you again kind of want to tease out or mention, website addresses or anything to the audience?
Yeah. So the Yonomi app, as you mentioned, is a free app. It's available. If you've got any connected smart devices in your home, I think it is something you ought to give a whirl and see if it really does make things simpler and better and more delightful for you. So our web address is yonomi.co. Not com.co because it's 2017. If it's YONOMI .co. So if you're a consumer of smart home gadgets, please give it a try. And there's going to be, in the coming weeks, there's going to be a flurry of announcements about new things that are supported by Yonomi that I think our users are going to be very excited about. So we're very much looking forward to that. If you're a device manufacturer and you either bring a new product to market or you're trying to figure out how to deal with the expense of your old cloud infrastructure for your products, we'd love to talk to you about ThinCloud. I think it's very unique in its space and it can add a lot of value. So that's also available. More information on the website there. And we'll have another very exciting sort of B2B product coming out here in the coming months that we think is going to simplify and delight the experience for other device manufacturers and service providers trying to have services for the smart home. That's going to make things much easier for them too.
That is great. That is great. Well, Kent, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've learned even more. I learn every time I get to talk to you, and I'm sure the audience has learned quite a bit. It's been a great discussion.
Oh, it's very much my pleasure, Joe. Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work.
That's it for this episode of the Conversation of Things podcast. You can find all of the episodes and many ways to subscribe to the show at conversationofthings.com. And if you have a question or comment on the show, I'd love your feedback at joe@conversationofthings.com. This podcast, along with all of the Smarter Home Life content, is made possible in part by kind, wonderful audience members like you. Learn how you can help support the show at smarterhomelife.com/support. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on the next Conversation of Things.